I'm Warren Sharp, and this is Sharp Football Analysis. I'm sure by now this has become your favorite sports betting podcast, and the reason we just don't stop winning. We are now 8-1 on our best bets for this show. Find me another show that's running hotter than we are. We're 30 wins and 10 losses since I started recording this podcast for you guys at the beginning of last season. That's 75% wins over 40 different recommendations. We're looking to do it again. If you guys love that type of content, make sure that you give us a thumbs up and are subscribed. This week, we've assembled another panel of experts that's going to be delivering some of their best analysis and insight into all of these games, followed by some of the best bets that they think that you should be making and that I think is going to make you some money on these games. We're going to be hitting a variety of games, including BYU at Texas Tech, Oregon at Iowa, and then in the NFL, we'll hit the Sunday night game with the Steelers, the Chargers. We'll hit the Monday night game with the Eagles, the Packers. We're also going to be covering games such as the Vikings and the Ravens, the Dolphins and the Bills, the 49ers and the Rams, the Lions and the Commanders, the Giants and the Bears, and much more, all while giving you great insight and analysis that you will not find anywhere else. But before we get into that, we're back with another $100 giveaway. Last week, Jody R. was our $100 winner, correctly picking Marvin Harrison Jr. to score the first touchdown in the Cardinals-Cowboys Monday Night Football game. Comment below who you think is going to score the first touchdown in the Monday Night Football game this week between the Eagles and the Packers. And if you're right, we're going to pick a winner to get an additional $100 added to their Novig account. Make sure that you're subscribed to Novig. You could do so in the link below. And when you click the link below, you will get a $100 match on your first deposit. So make sure that you go over to Novig, check that out, click the link below, and then in the comments below, enter the first touchdown scorer. The show just started, and we're already giving away a couple $100. We've got best bets on the way. Don't move anywhere. All right, it is time to recap Thursday Night Football, and I really wish I didn't have to do this segment. I'm going to try to spare you the reliving of this game as much as possible. What we do have to talk about, it is part of the show. We got to address it. This is the first time since 1976 and only the second time in NFL history that both teams had more penalties than first downs tonight. This was one of the most disgusting games I've ever seen. Certainly this year, I can't remember another game that I've seen that was more devoid of anything positive, any form of good football whatsoever in this game. The thing that I saw while watching this game, and it was like, when the game's first starting out, you're like, okay, this is gross, this is bad, but maybe it'll get better, right? There's still 50 minutes left. Okay, there's still 45 minutes left. All right, there's still 35 minutes left. Okay, it's halftime and it's been terrible, but maybe the second half will be better. And as you're working your way through the game and nothing is improving and it's progressively getting more and more disgusting as it goes on, I couldn't help but think back to the scene from the White Lotus on the last season. And if you know what I'm talking about, let me set the stage. Sam Rockwell delivers one of the best and most insane monologues you will see in a television series. He's basically talking for over 4 minutes about why he moved to Bangkok. And if you've seen this show, you'll probably never forget the scene that I'm referring to. But Frank, who is Sam Rockwell, tells Rick, who is Walton Goggins, and the facial reactions from Goggins watching Rockwell talk to him about what he was doing and his exploits when he moved to Bangkok. I mean, progressively, his emotion just starts leaving his body. His soul is getting sucked out of his body. He just cannot believe what he's hearing, what he's seeing, and he has a visceral reaction to it, just like you could tell. It was great acting on his part, the reaction. It was a great monologue delivery. And that's exactly how I felt watching it tonight, was the reaction that Goggins had to Rockwell's delivery of this monologue about his exploits in Thailand. Felt dirty, felt like you needed to take a shower after watching it, felt it absolutely gross. I'll go to a couple of quick stats here. The Raiders attempted 27 passes. They were pressured on 22 of those dropbacks. I mean, an absurd amount of pressure from the Denver Broncos on Geno Smith. The teams went a combined 9 of 30 on third down. There were 22 penalties, 11 for each team, for 161 yards in this game. The Raiders lost by just 3 points, and this is what I couldn't just, it was inexplicable to me. Bad play is one thing. Stupid play is another thing. And Geno Smith, twice in field goal range, voluntarily took sacks. Twice in field goal range. They only lost by 3 points. If he simply throws the ball away, the Raiders are attempting a field goal, and they missed a field goal, and they were sacked on two third downs in field goal range that knocked them out of field goal range because of Geno Smith's stupidity, whereby they ended up punting the football. So they literally had 3 potential opportunities to make field goals. Even if they made one of the 3, they would have tied this game. They make 2 of the 3, they might win this game. And Geno Smith being just unaware of what his surroundings were or what the situation is in the game was, down in distance, etc., blew it completely for the Raiders. At one point, I even joked on Twitter, can ESPN take over broadcasting the fourth quarter of this game so that we don't have to watch it? Because I don't know about you guys, but I personally, just to digress on that subject, have not given more money to ESPN. I am holding the line on not caving into ESPN, who's going out the money grab for all the common people like ourselves who are trying to simply, I mean, I think most of us have YouTube TV, right? Because we needed to get the NFL package. So the NFL package is on YouTube TV. Then ESPN decides to come in with these ridiculous requests or whatnot, not strike up a deal with YouTube and try to get everybody to pay for ESPN services. So I personally haven't done it. I don't know if you guys have or not, but I am curious. You know, we've got a lot of subscribers and a lot of viewers of the show every single week. If you have not caved in, if you're like me and you're trying to hold the line, comment below. Just write the word hold, just like Braveheart, hold, you know, Mel Gibson and Braveheart. We're holding the line. I want to see how many of you guys actually have not caved in and you are trying to hold out like I am. But at any rate, this game was so bad. Final point on this game that we saw, I didn't actually mind Al Michaels. And that takes a lot to not mind Al Michaels for me, because most of the time the games are so exciting. And then his commentary and his the way that he calls the games just bring it down a notch. There were some things that, he did that weren't perfect, obviously, as there always are for most commentators, but Al Michaels in particular. But, his lack of enthusiasm for the most part was no different than the rest of what I was seeing on the field there. So it fit in really nicely in general, which means that we've got a boring and disgusting game on our hands. The last thing, I do want to throw this in there because I've watched this from Bo Nix for several weeks now against the Houston Texans last week and then tonight. Has there ever been a quarterback who is moving about the pocket more than Bo Nix, who then starts running towards the line of scrimmage? And he's almost at the line of scrimmage and there's nobody in front of him. I mean, he could run for a first down. He could run for 7-8 yards, but he decides to just chuck the ball off of 1 foot, not balanced, while running. And it's almost always incomplete. I mean, his accuracy on those passes are almost, and meanwhile, he literally could have just run for a first down. He might not have a 20-yard upside, but he could get a first down. He could get 8-9 yards on this run. But he just decides at the last second, I'm just going to throw it instead of just running beyond the line of scrimmage. It's never a situation like a defender is near him. He just decides to throw it. And he did that against the Houston Texans, and he did that tonight against the Las Vegas Raiders. In fact, he threw a career-high 39% of his passes while running at least 8 miles per hour. This is according to Next Gen Stats. He completed 6 of 11 of those passes for 97 yards and an interception. I mean, just completely inexplicable why he's deciding to voluntarily do this when he could just be running for these yards. He threw 15 completions on 23 attempts for 144 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. That's pretty much Bo Nix in a nutshell. Now, I did want to say, some people are asking, what is Bo Nix? Is this the Bo Nix that we're actually going to get? How are they even going to win games? How are they 8-2 right now? They're 8-2 through 10 weeks. The Denver Broncos are, with Bo Nix clearly regressing from his rookie season, clearly not taking that next step. The scary part about it for Broncos fans, I'll just share with you, is that Denver's offense has played the number 32 toughest schedule of defenses this year. This is the ranking of defenses this year that the Denver Broncos offense has played. We're talking about some historically bad defenses. We're talking about the number 32 ranked Dallas Cowboys, the number 31 ranked Cincinnati Bengals, the number 29 ranked New York Giants. We also obviously have the 24th ranked Las Vegas Raiders. Earlier on in the season, we had some bad defenses as well. So that's what they've played. And they haven't looked very good. The rest of the way, they're about to face this schedule of defenses right here. We're talking 4 games out of, what is this, the remaining 7, it looks like by my count here. 4 out of their last 7 games are against top 10 defenses. They'll also play the 14th ranked Jaguars. They play the Raiders again, and they have an easy defense against the Washington Commanders, but it's not going to be very easy down the stretch for this Denver Broncos offense. And I just don't know what they don't seem to be meshing. I don't understand some of the play calling. Like what was it, like a 3rd and 1, I believe. And instead of just running the football, they've moved the ball down the field by running it. And it's 3rd and 1 at like the 44-yard line, something like that. And then Sean Payton calls this backwards pass to, I want to say, Troy Franklin or Cortland Sutton, who then is supposed to throw the ball down the field, but somebody's on him, so he just decides to get tackled, and then they punt the ball away. It's like, why is that the time to call such a play like that? Why is that the risk? Is it the risk worth the reward? It's a 7-10 game at that point in time. Another field goal is massive for you. You can't afford to lose yardage there. Worst case scenario, you run the ball, you gain no yardage, you could kick the field goal, or you can run it again to try to convert on 4th down if you don't think you're within field goal range. But doing this double pass potential thing, just insane to me. And then you got that type of play calling coupled with Bo Nix playing poorly. Are we going to get a Denver Broncos team that's now 8-2 in this competitive division in the AFC West, going to have success like the rest of the way? But beyond that, it's like, what are they going to do in the postseason? This team is very clearly being carried massively by this defense, which, as I stated before, I think 22 pressures on 27 Geno Smith dropbacks. Now, the Raiders' offensive line is banged up. They lost some guys during the game, but they've been getting pressure on most quarterbacks that they've gone up against, and they've been having a lot of success against the run game as well. So this Broncos defense is carrying the entire team. Clearly, the punter is not carrying them. I mean, that was some of the nastiest punting work that I can remember seeing from this guy, shanking left and right, any which way. I mean, there's not even guys on him. He's just mishitting the ball. It's just inexplicable how you could punt that terribly. And I know it was a little bit windy, but we're not talking about like the ball is up at a high elevation or altitude and then it just blows some misdirection. Like, the guy is not kicking it well. Like he's dropping the ball 2 feet from his hands to his foot, and the wind's not going to affect it that much in that little span of time. So special teams not helping, offense not helping, defense carrying the load. That was the story for the game. That's the story for the season. And that's why the Denver Broncos are sitting here at 8-2. The only thing I'll say about the Las Vegas Raiders, and I don't know about Geno Smith, I don't think it's a major injury moving forward, but I'm very happy to have an under ticket on their season wins. That is not going to be in question at all. I'm going to start figuring out how I'm going to spend that money, because that is a nice ticket to have in your pocket. If you were a future subscriber with us, you also had a ticket on the Raiders under this season. So now this game is in the rearview mirror. Unfortunately, we'll probably remember it for a short while. Hopefully, it'll get washed away as we age. and we'll never remember this game ever, ever, ever again. But let's start talking and breaking down some of the games for this upcoming Sunday's slate, week 10, the NFL season. We're halfway through the season and have been on fire for all of our viewers through the first 9 weeks. My favorite play of the week, as you know, if you've been watching the show, has hit a ridiculous 8 out of 9 times this year on this very podcast. Looking back since we started the show last season, these recommendations that I'm giving out for free on this show have gone 30 wins to 10 losses. That is 75% hit rate. If you want all my plays for the rest of the season, this is a great time to get on board. You're getting one a week here from me on the show. But if you want more than that, and we're up over $4,000 for $100 bettors this year, we just slashed all of our season-long prices by 25%. And on top of that, you can get an additional 25% off with code SHOW25. So go to sharp.football, pick the package that's right for you, and get on board today at a 25% off discount with code SHOW25. One of the best games of the weekend will feature Drake Maye against Baker Mayfield when the New England Patriots take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And one of the things that you need to focus on for this game is how do each of the quarterbacks have success against what these other defenses do very frequently. So the first thing I'm looking at is Drake Maye against the Blitz of Todd Bowles. And Todd Bowles sends blitzes at one of the highest rates in the NFL. Drake Maye has actually been very good against the Blitz so far this season. He is averaging 74% completions, which is third best in the NFL, and 8.4 yards per pass attempt, which is eighth best in the NFL. But what he has been doing is really dropping his depth of target, his air yardage when he gets blitzed. He is throwing the ball extremely short. 7 yards per pass attempt when blitzed, which is 23rd, compared to 8.7 yards per attempt when not blitzed, which is the 5th highest of any quarterback. In addition, 28% of his throws travel 10 plus yards downfield when blitzed, which is 25th, compared to 39% of passes when not blitzed, which is 4th. So we might not see as many deeper shots from Drake Maye against Todd Bowles' defense, which is blitzing at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. The other thing that Drake Maye is doing, unfortunately for him, is taking a lot of sacks, and he talked about that publicly in some of the press conferences this past week. But his sack rate when blitzed is 26th in the NFL. 11% of his blitzes does he take a sack. So he does need to get rid of the ball even quicker at times and push it even shorter and not deeper so that he gets rid of the football. Todd Bowles is notorious for confusing young, inexperienced quarterbacks, and I have no doubt about it with the extra time to prepare that he's got some things cooked up to go after Drake Maye creatively with his defensive schemes. On the other side of the ball, you have Baker Mayfield, and this is a number that might really surprise you. Baker Mayfield is going to be going up against a New England Patriots man-heavy defense. The Patriots play man coverage at the 10th highest rate in the NFL. Baker Mayfield has struggled massively against man coverage and has major splits when dealing with man coverage. He only is completing 44% of his passes against man coverage. That's ahead of only Cam Ward, who is completing only 43% of passes against man coverage. Being right near Cam Ward is no place a great quarterback like Drake Maye is progressing towards becoming wants to be close to. He's averaging only 4.7 yards per attempt against man coverage. That's ahead of only Carson Wentz. So also another place you do not want to be. So we're going to see a lot of man coverage from the New England Patriots. Baker Mayfield is going to need to have some success against it. Now, Emeka Egbuka should be healthier for this game. That's a positive for him. But the negative is that Emeka Egbuka has not really done great against man coverage so far this season. Egbuka is averaging just 1.1 yards per route against man coverage compared to well over double that at 2.5 yards per route against zone coverage. So your number one receiver is struggling to get open against man coverage. You're going up against a defense that plays man at the 10th highest rate. How will this work for Baker Mayfield coming off of the bye? At least Mayfield will be healthier. Egbuka will be healthier. But how well will this team perform if forced to pass the ball? Because the Patriots are a pass funnel defense. They're really good against the run. It's going to be hard for Rachaad White to find open ground to make up on from a rushing perspective. It'll be interesting to see how both of these quarterbacks do going up against what their opponent does really well defensively. One of the biggest matchups of the 1 p.m. slate is going to be Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Minnesota Vikings. But specifically, it's Lamar versus Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. This is going to be the third time that these two have gone up against one another. And the reason it's so compelling is because of how different each of the matchups were the first two times that they played. The first time that they played, Lamar Jackson threw 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. He was sacked only one time. He averaged 16.2 yards per attempt and an 85% completion rate in a big Baltimore Ravens win. The rematch game, the second time that they played, Brian Flores made a major adjustment. And specifically, he played cover 0 on a career high for Lamar, 21 dropbacks. Confused Lamar, forced Lamar into things he didn't want to do. And as a result, Lamar Jackson in the rematch game averaged only 5.5 yards per attempt, down from 16.2. Averaged only 61% completions, down from 85%. Only threw 1 touchdown to 1 interception, down from 5 touchdowns with no interceptions, and was sacked 4 times, up from 1 sack in the previous meeting. Now, Lamar Jackson still has struggled against man blitzes. Even this season, it hasn't been perfect. If you combine the last years with Todd Monken as his offensive coordinator, Lamar is completing only 55% of his passes for only 4.6 yards per attempt against cover 0 specifically. Now, the Vikings, fortunately for Lamar, do not play this very often. And in fact, they're 31st in the rate of man coverage blitzes. So they don't play a lot of man coverage. They are 21st in the rate of man coverage, and they don't send a lot of man blitzes. So this is something different that if Brian Flores wants to go back to what he did in the second meeting versus Lamar that caused so many problems, they're going to have to change a lot defensively to be able to go and do that against Lamar Jackson in this game. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to watching is how specifically does Brian Flores choose to try to defend Lamar Jackson? That's going to be really the deciding factor to me in this game. We know that Derrick Henry is probably going to be relied upon on the ground. Derrick Henry had a better game in the second half of last week against the Miami Dolphins than he did in the first half, where he was really bottled up, which forced Lamar Jackson to have to throw the ball a lot. We know that the Minnesota Vikings run defense stepped up massively last week against the Detroit Lions and forced Jared Goff to have to pass the ball a lot more. Plus, they got up on the scoreboard and forced the Lions into a more pass-oriented approach. Now, Jared Goff, when he was kept clean in last week's game, I know your short-term memory thinks that Jared Goff was absolutely horrible. He did not have a good game, but when he was kept clean, when those blitzes actually didn't create pressure, he completed 75% of his passes, 18 of 24, for 8.8 yards per attempt and 2 touchdowns. So the key here is going to be, what is the defense that Brian Flores is going to utilize here? Is he going to stick with what they've been using in Minnesota, or does he change it up for this matchup against Lamar Jackson? And are they able to get pressure on Lamar Jackson? Because if they're not able to get pressure, Lamar has diced up teams when he's not been getting pressure. Now, he's been good against pressure and blitzes so far this season. So I'm just really fascinated after that game against the Lions last week to watch Brian Flores' defense this week going up against a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. It's going to be must-see TV in the early slate on Sunday. The first game of the day on Sunday is going to be the Atlanta Falcons against the Indianapolis Colts over in Germany. And this game is going to be interesting for a variety of reasons. But one thing that I'm mostly focused on is, how does Michael Penix perform in this spot? Obviously, the Indianapolis Colts got Sauce Gardner at the trade deadline, and so he's going to help that defense tremendously. Probably going to be matched up some on Drake London. How will they move Drake London around, et cetera, et cetera. We have talked on this show previously about how Michael Penix struggles on the road and how he performs poorly on the road. Last week's game, you might look at the final score. What was it, 24-23? The Atlanta Falcons scored 23 points. Drake London had 3 touchdowns, and think that Michael Penix had a good game. Michael Penix, even in that spot on the road against the Patriots, despite Drake London having 3 touchdown receptions from Penix, averages 59.5% completions, averaged only 6.0 yards per pass attempt. This was more of a Drake London ridiculous apex performance of his potential than it was a good game by Michael Penix Jr. on the road. Now, not only is he going on the road, he's going internationally to play over in Germany. How well is he going to perform in this spot? And can the Atlanta Falcons actually survive if they fall behind? Because one of the aspects that Drake London and Michael Penix are going to have to deal with is the fact that when Michael Penix is behind or is just trying to simply push the ball down the field, he has not done it very successfully this year. On passes that he has thrown 20 plus yards down the field, he's completed just 7 out of 29 pass attempts. 7 out of 29. That is one of the lowest rates in the NFL. That's ahead of only Dylan Gabriel and Mac Jones. He ranks number 33 in completion rate, number 34 in completion rate over expected, minus 16% over expected on these throws 20 plus yards down the field, and number 33 in EPA per attempt. So if they fall behind early and are forced to dig themselves out of a hole, throwing the ball, trying to gain bigger chunks because the time they're going up against not just the Colts, but the game clock, it may not look very pretty for the Atlanta Falcons trying to get back into this game. So it's incumbent upon them to try to stay tight early. That's going to be a challenge because of how incredibly sharp Shane Steichen is early in the game with his early play calls, his game scripting, and the way that he attacks opposing defenses. We saw them march the ball down the field against the Pittsburgh Steelers, score on that opening drive 7 points, but then that offense kind of faltered a little bit after that. And Pittsburgh was getting a lot of takeaways from the Indianapolis Colts and Daniel Jones. Well, that's going to be interesting here if the Atlanta Falcons allow the Colts to get up early. The Falcons cannot afford to drop early in this game. And if you look, one last statistic on this one that's intriguing to me, the Colts have scored 61.3 points more than their implied team totals. So sum up their team totals each week, 23.5 points projected this week, 27.5 points that week. Sum them all together. The Colts have scored 61.2 points more than their implied team totals, which is the best differential in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons have scored 39.8 points less than their implied team total, which is the worst differential in the NFL. So you've got the team that's outscoring what their expectations are by the most points versus the team that's underperforming against their expectations by the most. Meeting over in Germany should be a fascinating game to watch. Josh Allen on Sunday goes up against a familiar foe, the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, these teams played once already this season with the Dolphins losing by 10 points up in Buffalo. Now the Dolphins are catching 9.5 points at home in Miami. Josh Allen knows the Miami Dolphins extremely well. In fact, he's played a full season's worth of games against the Miami Dolphins, 16 total games going up against the Dolphins. He's thrown 43 touchdown passes in those 16 games. That's an average of 2.7 touchdown passes per game. He's averaging 269 passing yards per game against the Miami Dolphins as well. So a lot of familiarity between Josh Allen and this Miami Dolphins defense. Now, though Josh Allen has been solid against these guys, this season, James Cook has been elite in terms of his performance. Listen to these numbers. James Cook, out of every running back with at least 50 touches, there's 44 such running backs, ranks number 1 in success rate, number 1 in yards per game, and number 5 lowest stuff rate. That is despite the fact that 51% of his rushing attempts are coming versus 8+ man boxes. He's going up against loaded boxes at the number 1 highest rate in the NFL. That's what the 51% is, highest rate in the NFL. Loaded boxes. And still, he's got the 5th lowest stuff rate and the number 1 overall success rate. So this rushing attack with the run blocking, the rushing attack with James Cook has been extremely successful so far this year for the Bills. Question becomes, James Cook missed practice on Wednesday, return to practice on Thursday. How healthy will he be for this game? And will he be able to perform quite as well as he's done in the past? Because they're going to need him to do so going on the road against the Miami Dolphins. Josh Allen has had success in these matchups. Like I said, 16 games, he's won 14 of them. He's 14-2 against the Miami Dolphins. How has Mike McDaniel specifically done against Josh Allen and the Bills? He's 1 win and 7 losses in his 8 games against the Buffalo Bills. So Mike McDaniel hasn't done well. Josh Allen's done really well. One interesting statistic here from a betting perspective, Josh Allen has played in 6 games where he's a road favorite of 9+ points, and he is 1-5 ATS in those games. So the Buffalo Bills might need to be pushing the ball, pushing the tempo a little bit more than you might otherwise expect. This might not be a blowout where they just ride James Cook late into the fourth quarter. We'll see how close this game is, but a lot of good track record for Josh Allen in this matchup's history. When you talk about the San Francisco 49ers, it is impossible not to discuss their lack of injury luck. Their rate of injuries is something we have not witnessed in the NFL for as long as I have been studying the NFL, with consistent, terrible injury history year after year after year. They just lost Mykel Williams, and this was a defense that was already spiraling out of control. I'll just share a couple of numbers as to what they've ranked on the season, but then also recently. They ranked 28th in EPA as a pass defense, but they ranked second to last over the last 5 games. They have allowed 6.1 yards per play over the past 5 games, which is the third most in the NFL. So they're the third worst defense. They ranked 6th best prior to that. So these injuries have absolutely taken a toll on them. Meanwhile, the LA Rams got Puka Nacua back at practice this week. They say he's going to be fine for this game. And while you can't overlook Kyren Williams and some Blake Corum and the way that these guys can excel on the ground and might have a little bit of success against this San Francisco 49ers run defense, it's hard to say anything negative about Matthew Stafford. And this matchup is going to be positive for Matthew Stafford. The Rams lead the NFL in success rate on passing plays over the last 4 weeks. They're coming along really nicely. They're utilizing different personnel groupings. They've lost some players offensively as receivers themselves, but they've adapted. They're using different personnel, and they're having a lot of success as a result of that adaptation. When these teams played in week 5, Stafford threw for a season high 389 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that game was in overtime, and the 49ers were leading. So the Rams had to play from a position of weakness, but they had a lot of success moving the ball through the air against the San Francisco 49ers defense that was in a much better place than it is currently. So I expect Matthew Stafford to have a lot of success here, moving the ball through the air with his receiving options healthy, and this new way that they are utilizing their personnel groupings are the LA Rams. But make no mistake about it, Kyle Shanahan has done really well against Sean McVay in the past, and this game's going to be an absolute battle. The Rams have taken some money. They're up to 4.5 point favorites on the road in San Francisco. It's going to be a really fun game on Sunday afternoon. Now joining us on the show is our college football betting expert, Ryan McChrystal. You can find all of Ryan's outstanding analysis every single week, breaking down multiple games, more than what he shares with us here on the show, over at Sharp Football Analysis. If you love to read about the matchups that are going to make differences in some of these games, I highly encourage you to go check that out. Ryan was off last week. We gave him the week off. He is back this week, better than ever. We're going to be breaking down 2 key games, and we're going to start with BYU and Texas Tech. We're going to look at our odds jam screen right now and see that the current number is between 10 and 10.5, but most spots still have 10s available if you want to lay the favorite. If you want to take the dog, grab the 10.5, which is why we highly encourage you to get the odds jam screen so that you can shop around and try to find the best value. This is a massive game, Ryan, that's going to go a long way to determining the Big 12 standings at the end of the year. 8-1 Texas Tech is hosting undefeated BYU. Texas Tech is laying 10. They got their quarterback 1 back, dominated K-State last week. Who do you think earns the cover in this one?
Yeah, huge game here in the Big 12. The winner becomes the clear-cut Big 12 favorite to make the playoff as the conference champ. I'm going to take Texas Tech against the spread here. And it's a big spread, which isn't too surprising because there's an obvious mismatch of talent. Texas Tech has the best collection of talent in the conference. BYU is one of those teams that always punches above its weight class, though. So they're usually competitive. But in this case, even though they tend to level the playing field with their style of play, I think they just catch Texas Tech at a really bad spot. Like I said, there's no question who has more talent. Texas Tech obviously feels like they should win this game, especially being at home, and they should win it easily. But to add to that, they had to sit at home and watch the college football playoff rankings show this week. and see BYU, a lesser team in terms of talent, come in one spot ahead of them. And that was bad news for BYU. You don't need to give a team as talented as Texas Tech playing on their home turf extra motivation to go out and prove themselves, which they obviously feel they need to do. You can just imagine the bulletin board material that provided to have BYU one spot ahead of them. So not only is there a little bit of a mismatch from the talent perspective, but you have the added motivation for Texas Tech. I think this is why it has the potential to turn into a blowout. Now, getting into the X's and O's a little bit, I really love this matchup for Texas Tech's defense because, like I said, they've got all of the talent. They are loaded up on defense this year, getting a ton of impact players from the transfer portal, and they're really built to stop this type of offense. We know BYU, given their lesser accumulation of talent, they want to slow the game down. They want to run the ball, bleed the clock, sort of drag you into a mud fight. But Texas Tech's defense really is built to do that. So BYU's physical rushing attack is pretty strong. They've got LJ Martin, a 220-pound running back who's really built for their system. Great fit there. They can run the ball against most teams, but the way they do it is they line up in heavier formations. They telegraph the run. You know what's coming, and so you can stack the box against them. Now, against some of the lesser teams, the mediocre teams in the Big 12, it doesn't matter. They can run through that stacked box with their physical attack. I don't think they can do that against Texas Tech, though. Let's look at some of Texas Tech's numbers when they're able to stack the box. They're allowing 0.2 yards before contact per attempt. That ranks first in the nation. They're basically contacting the running back at the line of scrimmage on every play. They're allowing just 1.9 yards per attempt with a stacked box. That ranks third in the nation. So what Texas does best on defense is stop BYU's offense. So not only is it a tough spot for BYU in terms of like the motivation factor and a big chance for Texas Tech to prove themselves to the committee, but BYU's style also just plays right into Texas Tech's hands. Given all those factors, I think this game has the potential to be a blowout. So even with the big spread, I'll lay the points and take Texas Tech here.
All right, you were all over Texas Tech all offseason, played it in the futures markets that we gave out to subs. So we're doing really good with Texas Tech, but you want to ride them again this week against BYU. It's going to be a fun game to watch. The second game to watch is also going to be fun, but for some different reasons. I'm interested to see what's going to happen here with this Oregon offense going up against Iowa. So your second game, as we look at our OddsJam screen, is Oregon taking on Iowa. Seeing right now, the Oregon Ducks are favored by 6 points rather over here at MGM. Some spots have them at 6.5. That seems to be more close to the prevailing number. Iowa's defense is allowing just 13 points per game. And last week, Oregon was held to just 21 points in their win over Wisconsin. We're looking at Iowa, though, hold with this total and this line for the Oregon Ducks as favorites. This team total for Oregon is just 10.5 to 11.5 in the first half is what the Oregon Ducks team total is. Their full game total is just 23.5. Ryan, I can't remember a time seeing the Oregon Ducks with a first half team total of just 10.5 or 11.5 points. That seems hard to imagine, hard to believe. But we're looking at an Iowa team that is 17-3 in their home games, the last 20 of those home games dating back all the way to 2015. Talk to us about this game, this matchup, who you think is going to cover this spread. And I'm just really intrigued to see if this Iowa defense slows down Oregon's offense here.
Yeah, I'm willing to lay the points here and take Oregon. I do think Iowa's defense can slow this game down. I think the only way they cover this spread, though, would be if they completely stop Oregon and it's get like a 13-10 kind of game. But if you think that's going to play out, rather than playing Iowa against the spread, then just play the under, because that gives you a more, wider range of outcomes. Maybe Oregon wins 17-0 or something like that, and you could still get the under. So I just don't really see much logic in playing Iowa here, because they're not going to be able to do enough on offense. Now, I think Oregon actually has an edge on both sides of the ball. So I'll talk about first when Oregon is on offense. Just sort of from a big picture perspective, Iowa's defense is built to stop Big Ten offenses, the traditional Big Ten offenses. And most teams in the Big Ten play a pretty similar style. It's more of a traditional old school style of play where they want to line up, run the ball, play good defense. And Iowa has pulled off some upsets against good teams. They've beaten Michigan in the Jim Harbaugh era. They've beaten some good Penn State teams. But Michigan and Penn State, even when they're at their best, have been more of that traditional Iowa-like offense. Now they have better players than Iowa, but the style of play on offense is pretty similar. They just want to play that old school style, run the ball, play good defense. And that's what Iowa is built to stop. So I was thinking, like, when was the last time Iowa actually beat a team or was even really competitive with a team more like Oregon and that style of offense? And I think you'd probably have to go all the way back to 2017 when they pulled off a big upset against Ohio State when Urban Meyer was still there. That's a long time ago now, though. Since Ryan Day got to Ohio State and modernized the offense even more, Ohio State has outscored Iowa in their matchups 89-17. And Oregon's offense is a lot more like those Ohio State offenses that Ryan Day is running there than anything that like Michigan or Penn State is doing. Oregon is running a much more modern offense under Will Stein. And so, I don't think that they can beat the style of team. And, some people might want to mention that Indiana game and how they were really competitive with Indiana. But again, Indiana's offensive style is more like traditional Big Ten. Fernando Mendoza is a very good quarterback, but he's a drop back passer. And they don't use a lot of modern things like RPOs. That's not a big part of their offense in the way that it is for Oregon. So it was, again, even though Indiana's a very good team and a national championship contender, but their style of play is the type of offense that Iowa's defense is designed to stop. They're not designed to stop a team like Oregon. So I think Oregon will be able to do enough on offense to get some big plays and force Iowa to play catch up at least a little bit. And I just don't think they can, because then on the other side of the ball, Iowa wants to run the ball. That's what they want. They want to run the ball, bleed the clock. They play with one of the slowest paces in the nation. So if you force them to play a little bit faster, the wheels start to come off a little bit, because their quarterback, Mark Gronowski, who they brought in from South Dakota State, has been a huge disappointment. He just can't throw the ball. They just don't have any kind of passing offense. I'll share a few stats to kind of demonstrate this. On dropbacks, when he is not pressured, they obviously have a good offensive line, so he's dropping back without pressure a good amount when they're throwing the ball. But when he is not pressured, he's averaging 5.9 yards per attempt. That ranks 134th. That's pathetic for a big power team like Iowa. Just to demonstrate that another way, on 3rd and long situations this year, 3rd and 7 or more, Iowa has 3 conversions all year against FBS opponents. That's a 9.1% conversion rate on 3rd and long, the 3rd worst rate in the country. How could you possibly expect to beat a strong offense like Oregon that way? If Oregon does anything on offense, they're going to force Iowa to pick up the pace and throw the ball. And Mark Gronowski just can't do it. And I think they're going to be put in some of those tough situations at a pretty high rate, because Oregon's defense isn't too bad either. They're forcing 3rd and long 32% of the time, the 5th best rate in the nation. So I think they're going to be able to kill a lot of drives by forcing Iowa into some passing situations. And I just don't think there's anything that Iowa can do to keep up offensively. As long as, if Oregon puts up 17 points, that's probably enough, because I think it's going to be hard for Iowa to even get to double digits in this game. So I'll lay the points with Oregon, and I'll take the Ducks against the spread.
Ryan, what do you think about the total in this game? If you think it's going to be hard for Iowa to get to double digits, 41.5 points as the game total, would you be looking to the under a little bit in that one?
I definitely lean under. Yeah, I definitely considered that for my pick for this game. Played Oregon just because, who knows? Iowa has a good defense. Maybe they get a defensive touchdown here or there that boosts the score up a little bit, and then Oregon just picks up the pace. They can quickly make up that gap if it happens. So I felt like playing Oregon was maybe a little bit safer than playing the total, but I absolutely lean under on that line.
Okay, perfect. Well, there's 2 great looks from Ryan in some of the biggest college games of the weekend. Hopefully you guys learned something from this, and hopefully you guys get some winning bets in out of the result of Ryan's analysis here. We learn something every time Ryan's on the show. We missed you last week. Glad to have you back this week. And keep in mind, there are outstanding additional write-ups over on sharpfootballanalysis.com from Ryan, previewing some of the other games this weekend. So make sure you check those out every single week before you look to lock in your wagers for the weekend for college football. Ryan, good luck this weekend, and thanks for joining us again. This season, we've partnered with Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market, to give you an exclusive opportunity to try out their platform. They're offered in many states that sportsbooks are not allowed, including California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and more. And right now, you can get a purchase match of up to $100 with code WARREN. Just click the Novig link in the description of the show below to get your $100 match when you open a new account. And don't forget, I don't know why people seem to not be doing this enough. Comment below who you think will score the first touchdown in Monday night's game. the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Green Bay Packers. If you are right, you may be able to claim an extra $100. So make sure that you comment in the comments below who you think scores that first touchdown. Also, make sure that you click the Novig link in the description of the show below to get your $100 match over at Novig. Now joining me is a loyal member of our Sharp Prop Squad and our fantasy football guru over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, Rich Rebar. As a reminder, you can find all of Rich's outstanding analysis throughout the course of the week over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. We always dive into 3 of Rich's favorite looks on the prop betting marketplace. And the first one that we're going to be discussing is Dalton Kincaid. Rich, you've got an interesting angle on Dalton Kincaid. I think you probably like his total receiving yards as well, but you're zooming in on his longest reception over as he travels down to Miami to take on the Miami Dolphins. The Bills are a 9.5-point favorite. As we look at the odds screen here over at Odds Jam right now, we could see that we're getting 17.5 at a number of spots, and others are at 18.5. So we'll go ahead and grade this one at 17.5. Rich, talk to us a little bit about why you like Dalton Kincaid to exceed 17.5 yards on his longest reception.
Yeah, and even if this stays under 20, I think this has a high probability to hit because he has cleared the 17.5 in every game this season. And he has a catch of 20 or more yards in 6 of 7 games this season. He is second among tight ends in yards per catch. He's third in air yards per target at 9.2 air yards. So he gets those downfield targets where we want to hit those longest catches. Also, the Miami Dolphins have allowed a tight end to hit this number in 8 of 9 games this season. The Carolina Panthers tight ends are the only game that they did not allow a tight end to hit this number. On top of that, they've allowed a league high 10 receptions of 20 or more yards to tight ends this season. Tight ends, we also should get some volume here. So if you do want to do the receiving yardage, I think is a good angle too. Tight ends have 31.2% of the receptions allowed by the Miami Dolphins this season. That's the highest rate in the NFL. And when these teams played in week 3, Kincaid hit this number. He also had 5 of 6 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown. Almost had a second touchdown in the game that was broken out in the end zone. But I like this even up to 19.5 if it ends up getting there.
All right, so that's a great first look. Don't disagree. This was one I know some of the listeners like to know, are we in agreement? Where this was one that I identified privately, you identified privately, we both shared, and you said, this is one I was looking at. I said, bingo, total match with me. So we definitely like Dalton Kincaid in this spot against the Dolphins for all the reasons you just stated. Excellent analysis as per usual. Next up, we're going to turn to a big game with Lamar Jackson going up against Brian Flores for round number 2. It's the Baltimore Ravens against the Minnesota Vikings, and you're identifying a receiver for Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, and you're looking at his receiving yardage props here. Right now, we're seeing several spots still at 63.5. You could actually, if you have Fanatics, 60.5, that's really low. So the highest points are 64.5 to 65.5. So this one has got like a 5-yard straddle. Definitely shop around, which is obviously why we try to share with you our Odds Jam screen. And if you click the link below, you can try out the Odds Jam screen for 2 weeks for free. I mean, no strings attached. Try it out for 2 weeks for free. It's a great resource to use when you're typing in, I want to look up receiving yards, and I type in the guy's name, pulls up everybody in all the different markets. It really saves you time, and it's going to save you money when you are trying to place these wagers. But you like the over for Zay Flowers. Talk to us a little bit about why that is.
Yeah, all the peripheral stuff for Zay Flowers has been excellent. He has 29.7% of the Baltimore targets. That's wide receiver 5. He's been targeted on 26% of his routes. And what we like about this particular matchup is the Vikings, again, they're a blitz-heavy team. They're blitzing at the league's highest rate. And with Lamar Jackson on the field, Zay Flowers has been targeted on a team-high 27% of his routes against the blitz for 3.31 yards per route run. Minnesota is allowing a league high 11.6 yards per target to opposing wide receiver 1s this season. They're allowing 76.8 yards per game to wide receiver 1s. And over the past 5 games, every wide receiver 1 has significantly cleared this number, with the exception of Jerry Jeudy, who we can asterisk.
Yeah, absolutely. Jerry Jeudy and that passing attack of the Cleveland Browns has just been a total disaster so far in 2025 with Dylan Gabriel, and prior to Dylan Gabriel even. Plus, they played that one game in the monsoon with the wind and all that. But let's look at your last look of the week now, Rich. You're going back to the well with a running back rushing yardage under, which is something that you've been throwing out on the show a lot and having a lot of success with these. And in this particular game, if we look at the odds jam screen, we're going to Kimani Vidal against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Once again, over the odds jam screen, you can see that there are some 57.5s, 58.5 even over at FanDuel. Other spots are 55.5, 55.5, 55.5. So 54.5 if you happen to have Rivers. So again, use your odds jam screen. Click the link below for 2 weeks for free. I cannot encourage this enough because it's a way to win more bets and to make more money on the bets that you do end up placing because you can find the best lines for them and it's super fast to do it. You like Vidal to go under 58.5, which is the current number over at FanDuel. This line has been bouncing all around, which is another great reason to have an odds screen like this. I know you use Odds Jam as well because you can see what the current numbers are. You can see when the line is moving. You can tell that this one you mentioned earlier opened higher, went down lower. Somebody bet it back higher, but you like the under. Talk to us about why that is.
Yeah. The odds jam tab just stays alive the whole week. It never gets shut down. But yeah, I like this one too. And this one is too, like, I think if it's in the 50s, I still like it no matter what. Vidal's been completely boom or bust. He has 138, 35, 127, and 30 rushing yards over the 4 weeks he's been filling in as the RB1. Last week, he only handled 54% of the backfield touches. It was his lowest rate over that span because he was ineffective. And then we also have to factor in the injury to Joe Alt for this running game. When Joe Alt missed week 5 against the Commanders, their running backs only averaged 3.6 yards per carry. Vidal's big boom game against the Dolphins actually was with Joe Alt out. And then Joe Alt last week when he left the game, Vidal ran for 3.3 yards per carry against the Tennessee Titans last week. So volatile running game, but this is a matchup where I don't believe they're going to have success running anyways. The Steelers are 4th in yards allowed before contact on running back runs. They just held Jonathan Taylor to 3.3 yards per carry. The week before that, they held Josh Jacobs to 3.3 yards per carry. And in particular, the infrastructure of this matchup is less of a signal for Kimani Vidal. I'm more bullish on him going under here. 33.3% of Vidal's runs have been inside zone runs. That's the 8th highest rate among running backs. Well, the Steelers on those runs are only allowing 3.4 yards per carry to running backs. That's 6th in the league. And then if we look at the rest of the sample for Kimani Vidal, you're like, well, that's only essentially a third of his runs. Well, 25.8% of his rushing attempts have been power concepts. That's the highest rate among running backs in the league. Kimani Vidal's only played 4 games, and he already has 17 of those runs, which is 5th in the league this season. Well, on those runs, the Steelers are only allowing 2 yards per carry to running backs, which is 3rd in the league. So putting all of those things together, the types of runs he gets, Joe Alt being out, and the success of the Steelers defense in the run game, I think this is an under for Kimani Vidal.
Great analysis. Yeah, with the power runs especially, I think that's the icing on the cake, given how frequently they're asking him to run those against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what should be a very close game, and I'm seeing some sharp money coming in on the Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit as well. So the Chargers might not be running away with this one in blowout fashion and allowing the running backs to take all the workload in the second half of the game. They might need to be throwing it a little bit as well. So that bodes well for Vidal's under as well. Guys, 3 outstanding looks from Rich as per usual every single week. If you want more of his analysis, first of all of it is over at Sharp Football Analysis. Second of all, if you like playing DFS and sometimes applying DFS to player props, which is obviously very closely paralleled, Rich releases all of his favorite DFS looks on Sharp Football Analysis on, I want to say, Friday afternoons, or I think it's Saturday mornings.
Yeah, Saturday morning.
You guys can go over there and check those out on Saturday morning. He's got his favorite game stacks. He's got his favorite tournament plays. He's got his favorite solid plays to make. 3 different articles that he produces each week for you if you love DFS over at Sharp Football Analysis. With that, we'll let you get out of here, Rich. Excellent stuff. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Good luck, everyone.
All right, now joining us on the show is our NFL referee expert, Joe Gibbs. You can find all of Joe's outstanding NFL referee analysis over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, where he breaks down some of the biggest referee notes and nuggets for each week, put some analysis in on some of the biggest games, and has a lot of historical data as well on all of these refs and some of their crews. So First up, we're going to be talking about our primetime games this week, Joe, because there's some compelling referee analysis for both of these. We start with the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling west to take on the LA Chargers, and whatever home field advantage the LA Chargers might have, given that the Steelers are winning, are successful. They've got Aaron Rodgers in his swan song of his career, and they're probably going to have a lot of fans there packed into the stadium out in Los Angeles. We've got the odds jam screen up right now, and as we can see, some money came in on the Pittsburgh Steelers actually today that dropped this line at several of these books from 3 down to 2.5. FanDuel's got 2.5, Novig's got 2.5, Hard Rock's got 2.5, ESPN's got 2.5. So there are a couple lingering threes if you like the Pittsburgh Steelers as the dog, but there are a lot of 2.5s now in the marketplace. The ref for this game is going to be Brad Rogers. What is Brad Rogers on the whistle here due to the outcome of this game, in your opinion?
Okay, yeah, so to your first point, Warren, it'll look very much and feel very much like a Steelers home game at SoFi on Sunday night. It's a destination stadium. It's like Allegiant Stadium here in Vegas. It'll be 75% Steelers fans, so throw out the home-road dichotomy. This will be all Steelers for the most part. As far as Rodgers himself, 75% of these penalties this season are being assessed on the offense and on the special teams. So to put that in perspective, the league average is just under 65%. So these guys go above and beyond in those two areas. The offensive holding false start combination, I talk about this every week. As far as percentage of overall penalties assessed, Rodgers ranks second in the league in those two categories. Now, this is key for a couple of reasons. 70% of the Chargers penalties come via offense and special teams, well above the league average. Conversely, the Steelers, just 52% of their penalties come via the offense and special teams. So you can see right there that Pittsburgh does have an advantage with this officiating crew if they continue to call it that way. Chargers top 3 penalized team for pre-snap penalties, top 5 penalized offense in the league in penalty per game average. Conversely, the Steelers ranked 30th in offensive penalty per game average. I talked about this a lot. Rodgers at the line of scrimmage is a master. Not a lot of penalties. They can't afford a lot of penalties because it's not an explosive offense. And he really runs a tight ship there, and Pittsburgh's benefited from it this season. Like I said, the Chargers have struggled. They've got their 2 tackles out, Alt and Slater, and that's such a huge deficit to overcome. Harbaugh, by his own admission, spoke about this in the offseason, that they look at those guys as weapons. You got Slater here, Alt here. Those guys set the stage, set the tone for the offense to dominate. Well, they're gone now. And so you've got a Chargers offensive line that is shaky against the Steelers defense. It kind of found its mojo last week. 6 turnovers against the Colts. They're not going to do that again this week, but they're going to get after it on Sunday night. Chargers are going to have a lot of problems at the line of scrimmage with the loud home crowd for the Steelers in SoFi Stadium. The Steelers themselves with Rodgers have done quite well. 5-1 straight up and against the spread with Rodgers. On the road, 3-0 straight up and against the spread, and 2-0 straight up and against the spread as dogs, as they are in this contest on Sunday night. So I like the Steelers here a lot. They're 2.5 right now, as you mentioned, but I think they win the game outright. They're not built to blow teams out, so it's going to be a close game just because that's the way it is. You got Mike Tomlin versus Jim Harbaugh, and you've got Arthur Smith and Greg Roman, the 2 offensive coordinators. So it's going to be kind of a slugfest, 23-20, 21-18, that sort of game. But I think Pittsburgh does just enough to win, and I like them here outright on Sunday night.
Yeah, the interesting part about this game, Joe, as you sort of alluded to, you've got Aaron Rodgers at the line of scrimmage, not making mistakes and penalties. Then you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers, not throwing interceptions like the Steelers have sometimes done. If you don't lose the penalty battle and you don't lose the turnover battle, then it does become you're forcing the other team to try to beat you playing an extremely clean game. And that's going to be tough to do with both the tackles down. A little bit of the crowd noise from Pittsburgh on the road might be coming in here to impact Justin Herbert as well. So Pittsburgh Steelers catching that short number could be an interesting look here based upon the crew as well. Okay, now let's look at the Monday night game, which should be a lot of fun as well. We've got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Green Bay Packers. The game is in Lambeau. These two teams met last season, once to start the year, once to end the Green Bay Packers season. Green Bay's got revenge on their mind. Right now, this line is sitting at around 2.5. Although I am seeing a 1.5 for the Green Bay Packers over at Novig. So that is an extremely sharp line, taking some Philadelphia Eagles money over at Novig and some of these other spots already. Otherwise, it is sitting at 2.5. And Clay Martin is on the call for this one. Joe, what's Clay Martin's involvement in this game potentially going to do to the outcome?
Okay, so Clay Martin for his career, home teams 48, 64, and 3 against the spread, just 43%. So keep that in mind. Martin's crew led the NFL. Since the start of 2023, no crew has enforced more of their penalties by offensive holding and false start than this crew, 44%. They've dropped a little bit this season, but they still rank in the top 5 as far as that goes. Pre-snap penalties are a point of emphasis, obviously false starts, but also then it ranked number 1 for illegal formation and co-ranked number 1 for offensive offsides. So, got to be disciplined at the line of scrimmage. And this is where the Packers have had issues this season. 46% of the Packers penalties come via false start and offensive holding. That's in the top 3 in the league. Conversely, the Eagles, just 32% of their penalties come in those 2 categories. So with this crew, the way they call things and the teams, as far as their discipline, the Eagles have a big advantage here. The Packers are a top 3 penalized defense on third down. The Eagles' penalties from defensive standpoint, 41%. That's above average, primarily from defensive pass interference and roughing the passer. Good news here for the Eagles is Martin's crew don't call a lot of defensive pass interference. They ranked last in 2024, and they ranked second last so far through 9 weeks of the 2025 season. So they tend to let them play in these sort of games. The Eagles with Martin, 3-3-1 against the spread all time. On the road, though, they're 2-0 against the spread, including a win at the Packers in 2019 on Thursday Night Football. The Eagles were a 3.5-point underdog. They won the game outright. The teams this week, the Packers, what are you going to get? You never know. You may get a 30-minute stretch of just brilliance, but you may not. So you can't really depend on them putting forth their best foot. Kraft's out. Offensive line's got some issues. Conversely, the Eagles are getting healthy. They made some trades before the bye. Picked up a couple of defensive players that they really needed. And in Sirianni's era, they're 4-0 off the bye, I think the Eagles are. So perfect spot for them here. They're not going to be intimidated to go in there to Green Bay. They went in there and won a few years back, as I mentioned. They beat the Packers twice last year. I think they go in again. I like the Eagles plus the points, and I kind of like them, to win the game outright.
It's interesting you mentioned the third down issues for the Green Bay Packers and their high penalty rates on third down, because Tucker Kraft had such an impact to this team on first down. And Tucker Kraft's ability to gain yards and have success for the Green Bay Packers on first down, they're now without Tucker Kraft. That might make their first down offense less efficient, which might make third downs even more important for the Green Bay Packers than they have been in some of their prior games this season. And if they're getting flagged for too many penalties on third down, that's definitely not going to bode well for their ability to drive the football against a good Philadelphia Eagles defense and then try to score points in the red zone potentially. So some great insights there, Joe. We really appreciate that. Obviously, you guys can follow Joe over on sharpfootballanalysis.com, where he posts his article every single week. It's must read. It's going to be coming out by the time you are watching the show on Friday. It'll be live over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Highly, highly recommend it. We love Joe's insights each and every week. So thanks for joining us once again, Joe. Good luck. A couple short dogs. We'll see how they do in prime time this week.
Great. Thanks, Warren.
Today's show has been outstanding, packed with expert recommendations from a variety of our professionals in the college and NFL spaces. But now it's my turn. As you know, this is my Novig value play of the week. We're 8-1 on the season, looking to go to 9-1 through 10 weeks. Very hard to do. Don't know if I can keep it up, but we've got one for you that I really do like. We're 30-10 so far on the 2 years that I've been doing this show, 75% win rate. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to the show. And if you love this type of content, if you love the winners that we've been giving you, we've got plenty more where this came from. If you want more action, make sure you go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Check out a weekly special. Check out a rest of season package, 25% off. Use code SHOW25 to get 25% off that. But let's dive into our Novig value play of the week. We turn to our odds jam screen, and we're going to look at the Josh Jacobs receptions market, and we're looking to go over 2.5. As you can see, most of the spots, -121, -122, but Novig is sitting here at 2.5, -120 to the over, and that's what we're going to go with for our Novig value play of the week. So what is it about this game specifically that I like as it relates to Josh Jacobs, where there are a number of factors here that are lining up for Josh Jacobs to have success. First and foremost, they're going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles rank number 1 defending tight ends, but they rank number 29 defending running back targets. We know that Tucker Kraft is now absent from the Green Bay Packers passing attack. A lot of people are just assuming that Luke Musgrave steps right into that role and assumes all of the workload that Tucker Kraft was being delivered. But I don't believe that's going to be the case, because the way that Luke Musgrave has been utilized so far this season is not the way Tucker Kraft has been utilized so far this season. If you look at air yards per attempt and all these other metrics, yards after the catch, Luke Musgrave is very different than Tucker Kraft. Actually, the player on the roster that's the closest to a similar usage as Tucker Kraft is Josh Jacobs. If you look at the air yards per target, Tucker Kraft was 4.5. That's nowhere near Luke Musgrave or the rest of these players. It's closer to where Josh Jacobs' air yards per target was. If you look at the yards after the catch, Luke Musgrave was 10.8. Josh Jacobs is 10.1. Luke Musgrave is at 2.6, as are these other receivers. Because we're going to see dropbacks still from Jordan Love, but no Tucker Kraft out there, I think a couple more are actually going to go to Josh Jacobs than the market is baking in. In addition, you've got the pressure. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles rank above average in pressure rate against the offenses that they've going up against so far this season. And when Jordan Love has been under pressure, his target rate to running backs jumps from 17.9% all the way up to 22%. And the wide receiver target rate dips from 57% down to 35%. So we're seeing fewer targets thrown to wide receivers, more targets thrown to running backs, which also plays in our favor here, looking at Josh Jacobs. And Jordan Love specifically, when under pressure, Josh Jacobs' target rate increases from 10% to 16%. And that's third highest on the team. And that's with Tucker Kraft leading the team in target rate when pressured at 22.6%. Now those 23%, almost a quarter of all the Jordan Love pressured targets, need to be going to other people. And the number 3 most targeted player on the team, highest target rate, was already Josh Jacobs, who was very close at 16%, to the number 2 most targeted player, Romeo Doubs, at 17.7%. Tucker Kraft was head and shoulders above the rest of these guys. Romeo Doubs, though, when Jordan Love is under pressure, Doubs is not catching any of the short, quick passes underneath. Doubs is the deeper target. We want to go for a bigger splash play down the field. Doubs' air yards per attempt is pushing 20 air yards on some of these pressured targets from Jordan Love. If Jordan Love needs to just get rid of the ball quickly, it's probably going to be more targets to Josh Jacobs. Now, I do think that Luke Musgrave definitely does take over the role and run a lot of the routes and call some of the plays that they were having Tucker Kraft do. So I'm not suggesting that Josh Jacobs is, the only beneficiary here. Obviously, Luke Musgrave is going to get more involvement. But I don't believe most people are anticipating that the secret other player who's going to benefit here is Josh Jacobs in the receiving game. And I happen to believe that he will. And I think that Josh Jacobs over 2.5 receptions is the Novig value play of the week. If we win this, we're going to improve to 9-1 through 10 weeks on the season. So hopefully we can get it done for both us and for you guys as well. So good luck to both of us. And that'll do it for our week 10 preview show. Tons of best bets. My best bet, looking to go to 9-1 on the season through 10 weeks. Hard to beat that. Hard to beat a 30-10 record over the last 2 years either. Make sure if you love this content, you go subscribe. Click the link below to subscribe. Make sure if you're on another platform, any of your favorite podcast apps, you use the subscription tools there to subscribe to the Sharp Football Analysis Show. And we'll be back before you know it.